Medieval masons knew a secret about stone that's making modern buildings fall apart before we finish paying for them. Every foundation today takes a single afternoon to pour. A medieval wall took a generation to build. And that missing time is why the driveway at the end of your street is already cracking after 5 years, while Salisbury Cathedral still stands 800 years later on foundations only 4 feet. Because during those decades of building, something happened inside the walls that modern construction has completely lost. Medieval masons, without knowing it, were using chemistry, geology, and living minerals to build structures that could heal themselves from the inside. A system that modern concrete still can't match. Today we're walking back into the medieval quarry because the reason your foundation is failing isn't in a modern engineering textbook. It's been sitting in the 13th century this whole time. Canterbury, 1174. The choir of the cathedral has just burned to the ground. Monks are sifting through warm ash, looking at a ruin so complete they think the church is finished forever. Then a man steps off a ship from France. His name is William of Sens. He is a master mason, and within a year he will rebuild the choir in stone so precisely cut that the joints are almost invisible. His crime, if he makes a mistake, will not be fined. He will be held personally responsible for a building meant to stand for 1,000 years. Now you might think that's extreme. It's just a church. But here's what you need to understand. In medieval Europe, if you got stone wrong, people died. Cathedrals collapsed. Towers fell on villages. Entire crews were buried when a vault dropped. That's why medieval guilds spent 7 years training a stonemason before he was even allowed to lay a block on his own. The punishments for shoddy work were brutal, because when a mason rushed the process, when he skipped the bedding check, when he mixed his mortar wrong, he wasn't just cheating on a job, he was producing a wall that would kill somebody 10 years later. And when your entire civilization depends on buildings that have to outlast your grandchildren, the cost of cheating is too high to accept. That's why the punishments were severe. But here's where it gets interesting. To build the way they did, medieval masons needed something most people today have never heard of. It didn't come from a hardware store. It came from a stone kiln on the edge of town. Every morning, a master mason's apprentice would walk to the outskirts of the city, to a pit lined with firewood where chunks of limestone were burning at around 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit. Out of that pit came a material that looked like chalky, jagged rock, quicklime. And if you dropped water on it, it would hiss, steam, boil, and release enough heat to burn your skin. If you saw a bag of it today, you'd assume it was industrial waste. Medieval masons treated it like treasure. The apprentice would carry blocks of freshly burned lime back to the building site in a wooden cart, dump it into a pit, and slake it with water. The lime would boil, steam would rise in clouds, men would step back and let it react. That pit of hissing, seething paste was the beginning of every medieval wall. They'd let it rest for weeks, sometimes months, sometimes a full year. Then they'd mix it with clean sand, scoop it between the stones by hand, and walk away. Because hidden inside that chalky paste were billions of reactive calcium compounds, an entire chemical system still alive and waiting to work. And when the masons spread that mortar between 2 blocks of limestone, something remarkable started happening. The mortar began pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. It started hardening, slowly, not in hours, but in years. That's the part most people today have never heard of. But there was a second process the mason didn't even know was happening. The mortar was learning to heal itself. A property that modern Portland cement still can't replicate. So what was the medieval masons actually working with? It's called lime mortar, and it's made from 3 ingredients: burned limestone, sand, and water. Here's the part modern construction lost. Medieval lime mortar is a living material. When a hairline crack opens in a medieval joint, rainwater seeps in. It dissolves a tiny amount of reactive lime inside the mortar. That solution flows into the crack. Then it recrystallizes as calcium carbonate, the same mineral that formed limestone in the first place. The crack seals itself. The wall repairs its own wounds, decade after decade, century after century. A research team led by Nardi, publishing in the journal Composites Part B, tested this exact process in a laboratory. They damaged lime mortar specimens, let them heal, and then measured what happened. The mortar recovered between 25 and 40% of its compressive strength on its own, with the youngest samples healing most aggressively. The researchers called it autogenous healing, the mortar doing it with no human intervention, no additives, no repair work, just chemistry and time. Now look at modern concrete. Portland cement, invented by Joseph Aspdin in Leeds in 1824, cures once and stops. It is a dead material. When a crack forms, it stays a crack. It grows. Water gets in. Steel rebar rusts. The steel swells and splits the concrete from the inside. The reinforcement becomes the mechanism of destruction. Modern concrete has no weapon against its own aging. It just fails. Medieval walls repaired themselves. We built walls that sabotaged themselves. The only real difference? Chemistry. But the self-healing mortar wasn't the only secret to their buildings lasting 1,000 years. There was something else in the medieval quarry, something any modern builder would look at and ignore, that was actually protecting every stone from the day it was placed. Walk up to a medieval cathedral wall and run your hand across the blocks. You'd see something a modern architect would never notice. Every stone has been placed in the wall the exact same way it was lying in the quarry. The same face up, the same face down, the same direction of the grain running horizontally, not vertically. This is called the natural bed, and it is the single most important decision a medieval mason ever made. Limestone and sandstone, the stones medieval Europe built almost everything from, were laid down in sedimentary layers over millions of years. Each layer is stronger along one axis than the other. If you place the block so the layers run horizontally, the weight above pushes straight down into the grain, and the stone holds. If you flip it, the weight now pushes along the grain. Water gets between the layers. It freezes. It expands. The stone splits along its own geological weakness. A perfect block of limestone, placed wrong, can shatter in a single winter. A paper published in the International Journal of Materials Science and Applications documented this directly. When sedimentary stone is laid with its bedding plane perpendicular to the downward pressure of the wall, the stone uses its full compressive strength and resists weathering for centuries. When the same stone is set on end, a mistake known as face bedding, water enters the exposed layers, freezes, and the stone delaminates along its own grain, often within decades. Same stone, same wall. The only difference was orientation. Every medieval master mason could read a stone the way a carpenter reads a piece of wood. They knew which face had been the top of the layer in the quarry, which face had been the bottom, which way the grain ran, and which axis would hold weight. Templates and bed molds passed down through workshops for centuries made sure every block landed the right way. That knowledge was so fundamental to their trade, it was invisible, like knowing how to swing a hammer. Now walk onto a modern construction site. Ready-mix concrete has no grain. A cinder block has no natural bed. The materials don't care how you set them, so nobody bothers to learn. We've built an entire industry around materials with no memory, and we lost the skill of reading stone along the way. You can hire a mason today to rebuild a medieval wall and watch him place the stones upside down. Not because he's lazy, because there's nobody left on the crew who was taught to look. But the mortar and the natural bed still weren't enough. Medieval walls did one more thing modern buildings can't do. They breathed. A medieval stone wall is not a barrier, it's a membrane. Water that gets into the wall also gets out. Moisture passes through the joints, through the pores of the stone, through the entire mass of the structure. The wall dries itself. Mold can't grow in a material constantly exchanging moisture with the atmosphere. Now look at modern construction. Portland cement is nearly impermeable. Vapor barriers are added to stop moisture. Waterproof membranes seal everything up. The logic is to keep water out entirely, but water always finds a way in, and when it does, it has nowhere to go. It sits inside the wall. It saturates the concrete. It freezes, it expands, it cracks the wall from the inside, and those cracks let in more water, and the cycle speeds up. Modern buildings trap the very moisture they were designed to exclude. This is not theory. Walk into any basement finished with Portland cement block and a poured concrete floor. The dehumidifier is running. The walls are sweating. Drywall is stained dark at the bottom. Now walk into the crypt of a medieval cathedral. It's dry. It has been dry for 800 years. The stone is breathing. Medieval masons didn't have the vocabulary to explain what they were doing. They called their buildings sound. But what they had built was the most sophisticated passive moisture system ever designed. We call that primitive. It's actually a system modern physics would approve of in a heartbeat. And it's gone. And it gets worse. Because starting in 1824, the industry that killed stone masonry has been rebranding the very material that destroyed it. After Joseph Aspdin patented Portland cement in Leeds, England, his powder conquered the world within a single century. Faster, cheaper, stronger on day one. Everyone switched. Through the mid-20th century, trade schools across the United States quietly dropped stone masonry from the curriculum. Apprenticeships dried up. The last generation that was taught to read a stone like a carpenter reads wood is now in their 70s and 80s, mostly in rural England, Italy, and parts of Germany. Ask a 30-year-old construction worker in America what the natural bed of a stone is. Blank look. The knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it stopped being profitable. And now, in a twist most people never notice, the same industry that killed lime mortar is selling it back to you with a different label. Go on any specialty hardware site. Look up Historic Restoration Mortar. You'll see bags of Portland cement cut with a small percentage of lime marketed as traditional or heritage compatible. But here's the trick. That product is still mostly Portland cement. It still doesn't breathe. It still doesn't flex. It still doesn't self-heal. The tiny amount of lime added is marketing, not chemistry. Want to know if you've been scammed? Read the label. Real lime mortar has 3 ingredients: lime, sand, water. That's it. If the bag lists Portland cement, cement clinker, or Type S hydrated lime cut with anything else, it's fake. You're paying premium prices for the same material that's destroying every historic building it gets touched with. The American Society of Civil Engineers published its 2025 Infrastructure Report Card this past spring. The grade for bridges was a C. More than 46,000 bridges in the United States are classified as structurally deficient. 178 million vehicles cross those failing bridges every single day. Estimated rehabilitation cost is $191.3 billion. That's federal data from the FHWA. We built the infrastructure of an entire continent out of a material that has now failed at a scale that will cost the next generation nearly $200 billion to patch up. Meanwhile, Salisbury Cathedral has never been fined for a structurally deficient tower. But here's the good news. You don't need a Portland factory or a 1960s engineering textbook, because the methods medieval masons used are simpler than you think, and they still work. Here's what medieval masons did, and you can do it this weekend. Forget the ready mix. Forget the vapor barriers. Forget the rebar. Medieval masons worked with 3 things: stone, lime, and the knowledge to read both. Here's the method. Step 1. If you're laying any stone, a retaining wall, a garden wall, a patio, a raised bed, look at the block before you set it. Sedimentary stone has visible layers. Turn the stone on its side. You should see thin lines running through it, like pages in a closed book. Those are the bedding layers. Place the stone in the wall so those layers are horizontal, running the same way they would in the ground. If you can't see the layers, rest the stone on a hard surface and tap each face with a chisel. The face that sounds dullest, the one that rings least, is usually the bedding face. Place that face down. Step 2. Skip the Portland cement bag. Buy a bag of natural hydraulic lime, sold as NHL2, NH or L 3.5, or NHL5 depending on the exposure. NHL 3.5 is the right choice for most outdoor walls in a temperate climate. Specialty suppliers in the US and UK carry it. Mix it with clean, sharp sand at roughly 1 part lime to 2.5 parts sand. Add clean water slowly until the mix feels like thick peanut butter. Don't add Portland cement to strengthen it. That destroys the entire chemistry. Step 3. Before applying the mortar, dampen the stones. Dry stone sucks water out of lime mortar too fast and ruins the cure. A garden spray bottle works fine. The stones should be damp to the touch but not dripping. Step 4. Apply the mortar between the joints. Don't overfill. Use a pointing trowel to press it in, then scrape off the excess. Cover your work with damp burlap or a cloth for the first 3 days. Lime needs slow moisture to cure correctly. If it dries out too fast, it goes chalky and weak. Step 5. Wait. Initial set takes 7 to 14 days, not a few hours. Full strength develops over months, even years. A Portland cement foundation reaches most of its strength in a week. A lime foundation is still getting stronger 20 years after it's laid. That's the trade-off. Speed for permanence. Here's what to expect. After your first attempt, the mortar might look soft. It might look slow. You'll want to press on it. Don't. That's normal. The lime is carbonating, pulling CO2 from the atmosphere, building crystals between the stones. After month 1, the joint feels solid. After year 1, it's harder than the cement you replaced. After a century, it will still be there. Don't repoint a heritage building with Portland cement. Ever. If your house was built before 1920, any masonry work on it should be lime. Portland cement on historic brick is the fastest way to destroy the brick because the cement is harder than the brick and won't move with it. The brick shatters at the joint. One safety note: hydrated lime is caustic. It burns skin and eyes. Wear thick gloves, sealed eye protection, and long sleeves. Keep fresh water nearby for rinsing. Medieval masons managed this risk every day with basic precautions. You can too. If you mess up, scrape the joint out and start again. Lime is cheap. The stone is priceless. That's the entire process medieval builders used to put up cathedrals that have stood for 1,000 years. No rebar, no Portland. Just lime, stone, and the patience to let chemistry do what chemistry does. If you want more forgotten knowledge that the modern world buried, hit that subscribe button. We're digging up the methods that actually worked, the ones the industry doesn't want you to remember. And if this made you angry about what they've done to our buildings, share it. Send it to someone who just paid for a foundation. Maybe it's not too late. We'll see you in the next one.